Hello and welcome everyone to today's tutorial. In this video we'll be painting this beautiful moonlit scene with a lake and a gorgeous blossom tree. I'm beginning today with a vague pencil outline. You can see on the right hand side I've just put in the rocks and a bit of a tree shape. I've popped a bit of masking tape across the horizon line where the sky is going to meet the water, just so I can get a nice straight edge. The pencil outline, you can see, is not very detailed. It's really there for guidance more than anything. So what I'm going to do now is going to focus on the sky first of all. So I'm filling in this top 2/3 of the paper with clean fresh water to begin with. Now we're coming straight in with some colour. This is indigo, and you can see I've just drawn a circle where my moon is going to be. Because we've wet the paper already to begin with, we're working wet on wet, and the indigo is going to continue to move and diffuse into that white circle that I've left for the moon. We're going to get a lovely soft halo of light, so we're just going to leave that alone for the moment and carry on introducing colour. This is going to be a really lovely simple 4-colour painting. The indigo is really going to be the star of this sky. You can see it's granulating beautifully with the amount of water we've got already on the paper. The paper has this lovely shine on it, which means that we can keep adding in colour and it's going to blend and diffuse and look really natural and beautiful. So this is colour number 2 is Potter's Pink. This is a lovely dusky pink colour, which I think blends ever so well with indigo or with any sort of, rich sort of dark colours. It's a really lovely, really interesting shade of pink. So I'm using it here to sort of balance the indigo a little bit and bring a little bit of warmth, a little bit of texture and dimension into our sky today. So now, whilst the paper is still nice and wet, I'm using my flat brush to just move the paint around a little bit to get it lighter in some spots and darker in others, just to get a nice, interesting wash that's got a little bit of texture and a little bit of movement to it. Not after just sort of a flat, plain sky here today. I want something something that lives, if you know what I mean. So now I've switched out from my flat brush to a synthetic mop brush, and I'm using now the Chinese white, which is an opaque white, so you can see it's holding its own a little against these really rich, deep colours. I'm using it for the clouds. I think I'm using an opaque watercolour as opposed to a translucent one. I found if you're putting in these sort of wispy clouds that sit on top of a darker sky, this is a lovely little trick to get them to sort of pop out a little bit. And our moon is in danger of being lost here, so this is a neat little trick. Wrap a bit of tissue around your thumb or finger and just boink, just pull a little patch of white, a little circlet of white there out of the wet. You can see because the tissue has sucked the wetness out of the paper there, the paint's going to stop its diffusion in that small area where the tissue was. So we've still got this lovely soft diffusion of white around this round moon, but the actual moon itself is going to stay white. The paint's not going to diffuse into it anymore, and it also means we can really carefully and delicately paint a couple of these wisps of cloud just drifting across that white moon, and which is going to really help bring this painting to life, I think. bringing in this nice dark cloud here. This is the Chinese white mixed with a decent dollop of indigo. So the indigo for the darkness and the white for the opacity, for that ability for it to stand out against the rest of the sky, which is got quite a translucent sort of sheen to it. And all I'm doing is I'm just going over and I'm layering the clouds where it looks like they should be, whilst the paper is still nice and wet, and I'm able to get some diffusion still where I add them in. Of course, if you're painting this, then by all means put the clouds wherever you like, wherever the pattern on the paper, when you put the sky in, wherever it looks like they would fit best. That's how I always paint my clouds. I always look at the sky and think, where would they be? There we go, taking off the masking tape, making sure to clean down the sides of the paper here, get rid of that excess water that could run wildly and make a mess. So now I'm happy with the sky. I'm starting work on the foreground. I'm just going to put a little bit of water down here where we're going to have our lake. Switch my water out. We've got lovely clean fresh water again. Just don't want to bring it quite up to meet that wet paint that's still there on the sky just yet. See, I'm bringing my flat brush up right underneath that. Just get it as close as I can without without getting too much, so spilling over and starting to drift down. And now I have dabbed my brush in some indigo, just using it to paint these big old stripes across here, but lovely soft diffused ones. You can see I've got some variation in the colour that's on my brush, which is going to help give a little bit of easy, simple texture to the water. I'm now going to use the flat brush, use its little sharp edge to introduce some shape and some texture, some lines here that are going to diffuse into the water we've just put onto the page, and help this lake to have a slightly rippled effect. And again, using the tissue here, sorry it's slightly difficult to see, but I folded it up and I'm sort of pulling it across in lines across the water there. That's a good technique to use if you accidentally put a little bit too much colour in. You can pull it out again quickly with the tissue, and it leaves sort of a nice little white line there. And of course I want to reflect the sky above in the water below, so I'm adding in an extra little bit of the potter's pink. It's quite faint and you can see it's granulating already, giving us this lovely, really interesting texture. Now all I'm going to do here is use the tissue to pull out the path of the moon glow in this lake. It's very easy. Just fold it up, scrunch it a little bit until you've got an edge that you can use to just pull these lines. Just gently work your way down the path you want to follow. See, I'm doing these lines to imitate the ripple and the movement of the light on top of the water. You don't want a perfectly straight, clean path, unless of course your water is dead calm and dead still. And this lake here, we've already got a little bit of texture in it, a little bit of movement. So we're doing a wibbly wobbly liney moon path. And now just using the folded tissue again to pull a little bit of paint out further, a little bit higher up in the lake, give it a little bit of extra movement and texture in the water. And here we are. It's had time to dry and you can see the sky is still this lovely blend of indigo and potter's pink. It's come out really lovely and pale. We've got our moon standing out proudly against those lovely scudding clouds. The lake has come up quite pale, which is nice. It's nice to have a paler reflection. Our moon path is still there, thanks to our clever trick with the tissue. So all I'm doing now is following the faint pencil outline that I put in earlier and introducing a little bit of land. So this is again the mix of the potter's pink and indigo. I've mixed it up a wee bit on my palette. I'm using the flat brush to just splotch it in, get a nice little spit of rock coming out here, getting a little bit of interesting texture and colour in it. You can see I'm coming in quite thickly here with the paint, especially on this this higher rock here. I've introduced quite thick potter's pink and indigo, and I'm sort of blending them on the paper. Almost, we're getting this lovely granulation here with the water as well, and I just want a really nice sort of mottled, marbled and really interesting bit of texture here. And now I'm just coming in with a foliage brush. This is an optional little step. I decided I didn't like the sort of sheer look of these rocks and decided to just rough it up a little bit. So I've dunked my tree and texture brush in a little bit of indigo, and I'm just introducing some more texture, a few dabs of just a little bit of detail along the edges of the rocks here, just to make them a little bit more interesting. Again, if you prefer a sheer-sided rock or cliff edge, then go ahead and skip this step. For me, I was just interested to see the effect it would bring, and it turns out I quite like it. Which is fortunate, isn't it? Because it is my painting. It'd be terrible if I didn't like it. But there we are. I'm introducing a little bit of extra potter's pink in as well with the texture brush. I apologise as well for the light. As I was painting this, evening was starting to come in through the window beside me, so the painting is looking a little duller and a little paler, a little more tired than it actually is. I shall try and get some good shots of it in proper light to show you at the end. The colours are a little lighter, a little brighter, more vibrant. That sky is a little bit richer and deeper in real life. I'm afraid you're just going to have to take my word for it at this moment. But we're finally at the stage of drawing in our blossom tree. And I am vaguely following the pencil outline that I put in earlier. In all honesty, I think I did it a little bit too light. for the depth of colour that I ended up with in the sky, so I can still see the vague outline of it, but mostly here, apart from the sort of three main branches, I'm sort of going my own way, following my own creative path, so to speak. So I'm just using a liner brush here. This is my sword liner brush, my favourite liner. But any sort of small brush or rigger brush or anything with a decently pointed tip would do just as well for this. And I'm introducing the branches into our beautiful tree. I want it leaning precariously over this lake, coming out beautifully from the rock. I started to introduce some tangled roots on that little spit of land as well. The impression that this tree is really holding on tightly onto its land and reaching out over the surface of the water towards the moonlight, perhaps. You can see I'm just going along and trying to do these small, delicate, sort of spontaneous little brush strokes, keeping them thicker, closer to the trunk, and then really using the delicate point of the liner brush to do some much finer strokes the closer we get to the ends of the branches. I want this to look really lovely, sort of loose, natural, and spontaneous. Oh, I believe I forgot to mention as well, I'm using Payne's Grey to draw in the tree. I needed a colour darker than indigo, and that's my go-to. I had some on my palette left over from my last painting. So I've wet up a little bit of Payne's Grey, and you can see it's going really nicely in silhouette against the indigo sky. And now, of course, you could just leave this tree in silhouette. I think it looks beautiful and elegant as it is. But again, playing with the tree and texture brush, I decided to introduce some blossoms, which I think is really a simple and effective method. Basically, all I did was mix up a little bit of the Potter's Pink and Chinese White on my palette and dab my brush into it. The Chinese White gives this lovely hint of brightness underneath the pink. It's an opaque white, so I don't use it very often. But at the moment, I think it's really making that Potter's Pink stand out beautifully against the sky. We're getting these lovely pink-white sort of clusters of blossom on these boughs, which I'm careful to keep sort of at the end of these wispy branches, where the blossom would, of course, naturally bloom. And just gently using that tree and texture brush to just dab in these lovely loose soft blooms. And now I decided to really push that dark spot a little bit further. Where the tree is firmly rooted onto that rock, I decided to pull out a few roots onto the hillside. Just get this lovely sense of movement and texture, and the feeling of this tree really sort of gripping onto its little spit of land. So again, using the very fine point of my liner brush, just pulling a few straggly roots out of this pool of blackness, which is in fact a pool of Payne's Grey. Just giving a little bit of extra detail into this painting. You can see our paint has run here a little bit. It's dried unevenly, so I'm just using a mop brush to just pull it together a little bit, pull a little bit of water out, and just gently sort of move that water around and still get on sort of nice, concise rocky textures without worrying too much about it blooming out into a cauliflower or some sort of ugly mark as it dries. I decided to just come back in again. You can see the white really popping out here, just to add a few extra highlights. Just wanted to give the impression that these petals are sort of being blown by the wind and drifting into the night sky. You can see me extending the pink and the white a little bit further out from the tree towards the moon, to give that impression of it being blown by the wind, a little bit of movement here. And also adding a few extra little white highlights to really make this tree pop out. Here we are with the big tape reveal. It's one of my favourite parts of painting. Take off all the dirty wet tape. Nearly lose the painting in the process. And we revealed this lovely clean white border and the finished painting. So there we are with the finished painting. I hope you can see how lovely and rich the colours are. This detail on the tree I think works really nicely with the texture brush. But let me know what you think. Let me know as well if this is the sort of painting you'd like to see more of from me. I must admit I absolutely thrilled with how this one came out, really over the moon, so to speak, and definitely want to try doing more in this vein again. So thank you everybody for watching. Please leave a like or subscribe to my channel if you aren't already. Please also consider checking out my extra painting tutorial videos on Patreon if you'd like to see some more. And as always everyone, stay safe, stay well, and I look forward to seeing you all again in the next video.